Alright, welcome back everyone. Carolina XC Round 7 Whitetail Retreat. If the last couple rounds had some sand, this one had all the sand. It was just sand from start to end. You can see me struggling in it here. I think the good thing is, it seemed like everybody else was struggling in it as well, so it wasn't just me. But yeah, you can hear me complaining about it. It was nothing but sand. We ran this track at the very end of last season, and I remembered it being a struggle that day too. But of course, this time it's a doubleheader, so we get to do it twice in a row. There are some deep whoops. They weren't too terrible. Only in a couple spots was it really bad. The rest of the time it was actually pretty chill. This stuff in the woods isn't honestly that bad. Like, as long as it's not terribly whooped out, I don't mind it so much. It's just in the open fields where there's like these deep sand corners that I just don't know what to do with it. And I do feel like towards the end of the second day, I was getting a handle on it a little better, but it's still something I'm just not very good at. And I feel like there's a lot of people that are in the same situation. Hit that dip there a little hard. But yeah, coming into this race, I was already not feeling that great. I had been sick Thursday and Friday earlier in the week, and didn't go to work those days, and honestly considered not coming to the race at all. But I'd already paid for the pre-entry, so I decided, you know what the heck, I'll load up the bike and I'll at least show up, and I'll see how I feel when I get there. And then once I was there, I was like, well, I've already driven this far, I might as well get out there and do it. And I'll be honest, after this first lap, I was very, very close to pulling off. Like, I normally, once I start a race, I'm not one to quit, but I was really considering it. You can see me struggling in the sand somewhere. I very nearly pulled off and quit after the first lap, but thankfully I didn't. Well, I say thankfully. It didn't work out so well for me towards the end of this moto, but we'll get there when we get there. You see me dropping the bike. I think I dropped the bike twice in this open field section on the first lap. Yeah, drop it again right there. I did towards the end of the weekend realize what my problem was in these sand corners, and it's because I was still onto the rear brake coming into the corner, and you just can't do that in the sand because as soon as you lose momentum, the front tire just digs in and you dump the bike. So I found out that what I really needed to do was just be off the brakes entirely before I get to the corner. So I need to do all my slowing up before the corner and then just be off entirely and then just send it into the corner, and that seemed to actually work. It's more of a commitment issue than anything. Like, you gotta have the balls to just send it through the corner and be confident the bike's gonna bite in and not send you over the handlebars. It's a little daunting, to be honest, and even after I figured it out, I still had trouble with it because it's just you just gotta commit. There's nothing else to it. You just have to commit to it, and it may go wrong sometimes, and you just have to be okay with that. But I want to get in real quick to the drama that happened before the race started, because I showed up and decided I was going to race, and grabbed my helmet, fired the bike up, rode up to check-in, checked in fine, everything was happy, hopped back on the bike, was riding back to the truck, and it died on me. And as soon as it died, I knew exactly what it was. It's the same way that when my old 2014 KTM would die, I knew it was the spark plug immediately. It fouled the spark plug. Now, this is a 2023 Husqvarna TPI bike, and I've never had problems out of it as far as fouling spark plugs. And then it just fouled this one out of nowhere. Basically, I hadn't treated it any more different than I had before. Usually I fire it up, I let it idle for a minute or two, and then I hop on it and go and clear it out as I ride, and it's never been a problem. This morning I did the same thing, but like I said, as I fired it up the second time and took off back to the truck, it didn't die immediately, but maybe 30 seconds after I started up and started going, it just blah, and like I was at a loss, 'cause, like I hadn't dealt with that on this bike before. I think it's really down to the fact that I've got about 6 hours on the top end at this point, and it's due for a rebuild. So I went ahead and ordered the stuff to do the rebuild tonight, actually, right before I started recording this. So I've got that stuff on the way, and I'm gonna do the rebuild, and hopefully that'll straighten it back out. But yeah, so I got back to the truck, and I was panicking because I didn't have an OEM spark plug for this bike. I had been meaning to get one, but every time I went on Rocky Mountain to look at them, I would just get really angry because they're like $25 for one spark plug. It is ridiculous. So I never ordered one. But luckily, as it turns out, the spark plug that goes to my KTM, which is actually, I don't even use the OEM spark plug for the KTM because it's expensive too. I use a NGK BR8ES or something like that. It's basically the same plug, but it's got a copper core instead of an iridium tip. But it works just the same. And luckily, as it turns out, that plug also fits the Husky. So I did have a spare plug for that bike sitting in the truck that had just been in there forever. So I popped that in, and thankfully the bike fired up, and I ran to the start line real quick, and I got there maybe 2-3 minutes before we started. So I was cutting it a little close. You can see here at this point my arms are just done, and I'm just waving people by. This back section had a lot of whoops in it. They weren't deep whoops, but man, they just kept going and going and going. It's like, golly. You know, you sit down for a second thinking you're going to get a little bit of a break, and then right around the next corner you got more whoops. You just don't get a break. But yeah, just like the first lap on pretty much any race, I'm way too tense, I'm way too tight, and because of that, I end up pumping up my arms real bad. And it's even worse when you're in terrain like this. You can hear the bike sounds a little weird as it's kind of stuttery as it comes onto the power, and I think that's down to the fact that the stock plug for this bike is an 8 heat range, and the spare plug that I had was actually a 9 heat range. Ooh, that was a pretty good fall. But I didn't even remember that happening. But yeah, I think just the heat range being different, the Husky didn't like it as much. So yeah, I've ordered some more plugs. I've got one more race. I think I'm just gonna send it for the last race before I do the top end. And we'll go. Man, those kids in the minis, I swear, they go so hard. Like, they are full speed or nothing. That little bump I hit there, I'm pretty sure caught a few people. Like, it was a route that's like right at the other end of a dip, and like if you weren't paying attention, it would throw your front end. They ended up spray painting some of those routes for the next day, or maybe they did it for the second moto. I don't remember. But there you go, my first lap, and at this point right here, I was seriously thinking about pulling off. Like, I was just done. But I did hang in there, and this was my 4th lap, next to last lap. And I don't know if you see it. I certainly did it when I was racing. But that little orange light right there on my bike, yeah, that's my low fuel light. It came on probably halfway into the second lap. So as you can imagine, things aren't going to end well for me this moto. In my rush to get the bike, get the plug in the bike and get it to the start line, I completely neglected to fill my tank up. It's usually something I do right before I go to the start line, and I was so preoccupied with the plug, completely forgot. So I am running on basically fumes at this point, and it's already been like a pretty hard. It's a pretty hard track as far as fuel consumption goes, just because of the sand, that deep sand. You really have to rev the bike to get through it sometimes. So using a bit more fuel than normal. At this point, I was still going, but man, you can just see the difference in speed from the first lap to this one. Absolute way down. This spot right here, there's this like really awkward route, and it just got progressively worse as the day went on. Yeah, that inside line was actually not really the line to take, and I think people realized that later on because the outside line got a lot more burned in, but it was a lot easier because it kind of took you around that weird route. Which, I mean, the route wasn't too bad, but once it started really getting exposed, if you weren't careful, it would throw your front end if you hit it. Which is always sketcy when you're riding in between trees. Just babying the bike. Also, this whoop right here. That one. Man, that thing got deep. Actually making a pass here. Can't believe it. This wood section here kind of coming in, it was a little rough, but this was probably my favorite spot. Just this wood section here out into the next, like I think the next spot where you cross the power lines. It was really nice in here. Although this tree right here, those roots got exposed pretty bad and it got sketchy. I did like this little spot in the gully though. This was really cool. Riding in gullies is always cool. It's just fun. It feels really cool. It feels like you're in like a half pipe or something. I don't know. I love it. An inside line ended up getting cut right there later on, and it was not the line to take. That further outside line was definitely better. But the thing about this track is, this place in here ended up getting like really weird as the day went on. Like it just, I don't know, it was kind of bizarre. Okay, so there, the bike bogged the first time, and I was thinking it was the spark plug again, and I was like, oh, don't start in the middle of a race. That's ridiculous. But the bike started going again. I was like, okay, good, we're fine. Maybe it was just a fluke. And then I come around this corner right here, and oh, it is done. And then I realized what happened. I look at the tank, no fuel. I try to lay the bike over to get some fuel to the other side, hoping maybe it'd be enough to get me through. But yeah, there's nothing there.
First time that's ever happened.
I'll get a guy to come pick you up.
So, Zach told me to push my bike to the power line, which I don't know if you know this. Riding the bike in the sand sucks, but pushing the bike in the sand, even this like more hard packed sand, dude, it sucked. By the time I got right here, I thought I was gonna die. You see me panting. And then they showed up with the side by side, and I had to get the toe of shame. I've never been towed out of the woods before, for as long as I've been racing. So this is the first time it's happened to me. And over empty gas tank. That sucks so bad. Straight to the second moto, though. Will I get a better start? I got off the line fairly well. I always get off the line fairly well. Nah, no. Just all over the place in the sand. Cooper passes me immediately. He struggles in the sand a bit too, but he seems to handle it better than I do. If you can get in a straight line and gas it, you're okay, but man, it's just anytime you're in a corner, it's just, what do you do? I don't know. Sometimes I think I have it figured out, and then the next corner, it just doesn't work. As you can imagine, this second moto went, I would say a lot better, but it definitely went better because I actually finished the entire moto. So, you know, small victories. The track, of course, was even more bombed out, but that was expected too. I mean, that's just the nature of it. I think I do manage to start hopping this little gap up here. We'll see if I do it this lap or not. I don't remember. Nope, still went through the dip. I saw a kid on an 85 just freaking launch it over that gap, and I was like, that is the way to do it. And I don't know if it was, I think it was this Moto that I started doing that myself, and it really was the way to do it. This spot right here got kind of bad. There was a lot of mud on the right. Well, it wasn't really mud because it was sand, but it was like wet, really wet, like soupy sand. I don't know how to explain. That spot was bad last year too, so I don't think it had anything to do with the rain that we got the days prior to the race. I think that spot just holds water for some reason. Because I remember in particular, my first moto last year, I got stuck right there for a second because of how like the front end just like sucked down into that sand soup, and it was like, it's almost like quicksand, I guess. Look at me. See, I was getting a little better at these sand corners. Oh, that I didn't do so good there, but as the day went on, I did tend to get a little better at it. Trying to go wide to stay out of the deeper spots. I really like this little spot right here, mostly because I can see my truck on the right. I could check on it every time I went by. Speaking of my truck, by the way, and I'm going to be making a separate video about this. A lot of you guys that know me know I've been running the lock and loads for my bike for a long time. It's a transport system by Risk Racing. Basically, there's these ratcheting hooks that you push down onto the pegs, and it holds the bike, so that way you don't have to use ratchet straps or pull straps or whatever. I hate straps; they're a pain in the neck. And I've been using these for, well, I first got them I think in 2019, I want to say. But for the first 2 years, I had them mounted to a trailer that I towed behind my truck. And I got tired of having to hook and unhook the trailer all the time. It was just a hassle. And Risk Racing advertised them as, you know, being able to put them in the back of your truck. So that's what I did. I decided, since, you know, I'd had them for a couple years, I liked them, I was going to keep them. I would take the plunge and drill the holes in the bed of my truck and mount the base plates in there. Because the way it works is there's a base plate that the arms slide into, and then they ratchet down onto the pegs. Anyway, followed the instructions, used this supplied hardware, mounted the plates to the back of my truck, and I've been running it for, I think, 1.5 years now in the back of my truck. But loading up from this race, I hooked my bike down and gave it a little wiggle. I always just give it a wiggle to make sure it's seated correctly. And the bike moved a lot more than I thought it should have, which I thought was bizarre. So I took a closer look, and on the left side, the plate was like lifted off of the bed of the truck. And I was thinking, oh man, the bolts have come loose, right? So I unhooked the bike, pull it off the back of the truck, and take a look under the truck to see if the bolts are loose. And no, the bolts weren't loose. To my horror, the bolts had actually started to, they had cracked the bed of my truck and were ripping the bed up. So now I've got two big, huge circular cracks in the bed of my truck that I got to figure out how to fix. And thinking back about it, I do remember when I was putting everything in, thinking that it was a little weird that they only called for 2 washers to be used on the bolts underneath the plates. I was thinking that didn't seem quite stout enough for the kind of forces that would be exerted on the bed of the actual bed, but I kind of thought about it and then dismissed it and didn't give it a second thought and just went with it. And to be fair, it did work fine for like 1.5 years, but yeah, if you have a lock and load, I guess is the point of this, and you're using it in the bed of your truck, take those washers off and put a metal plate underneath to better support it, because otherwise you're going to rip a hole in your bed like I did. My plan, I think, is I'm going to go back and just kind of tack the bed back together where I can, and then cut out a nice metal plate to go underneath to support it better, and then just keep running it, because I mean, at this point it's already cracked a hole in my bed. How much worse could it get? But yeah, I was really bummed to find out about that. I am gonna make like a video showing what happened and everything when I get around to it. It's gonna be a project for next weekend, I guess, since there isn't a race. Anyway, enough ranting about real world stuff. This spot right here, that root right there, I didn't like it the entire race, because like it angles towards that tree, and if you hit it kind of like in the crux between where it meets the tree and the tree itself, you're fine. But if you hit it anywhere else on the left, because of the way it's angled, it makes your front wheels slide all the way to the right towards the tree, and I don't know, it's sketchy. You can see there they did actually paint one of those roots that was at the end of one of those whoops. I think somebody got hurt. I want to say I remember seeing somebody laying on the ground the first moto. But yeah, it was good of them to go back and paint those, because you honestly couldn't see them. That's the first lap of the second moto done. Definitely felt better. Looks like I did better too. Second moto, or second moto. This is the second moto, yes. But last lap, second moto, lap 5. Didn't even see lap 5 on my first moto. Going through the sand here. You can see that I'm generally handling it a bit better. I don't know if it's because I was actually getting better at it, or is it just because the line was getting burned in better that it was easier. No idea. Oh, there's my truck again with its nice cracked bed. I definitely felt faster the second moto. That's usually the case. You're faster in the second moto. But aside from, you know, feeling faster, it just feels better. This is that outside line I was mentioning earlier that went around that route, by the way. Definitely a better line. But anyway, yeah, it's just I don't know if it's actually that much faster, but it just feels better. And I think it's because you go into the first moto and you're all stiff and not warmed up, and then you get done with that one and you get a little bit of a break to recuperate, and then you're pretty warmed up for the second moto, and then things just feel better. So I don't know about you guys, but I know some people take the time to like warm their bike up and do some runs through the parking lot or whatever, but I typically don't do that just because I don't want to hit anyone, and that would be my luck. I would be doing some sort of warm-up stuff way out in the middle of nowhere, and some kid would come out of nowhere on a 50 and I'd clip him. I don't want to risk it. So I don't typically do that sort of thing. So when I line up for the first moto, I'm like completely cold. Like, it's my first time on the bike for the day, and I'm just going for it. Maybe I should take the time to just putt around a little bit more and, I don't know, get more comfortable on the bike before I start, but eh. Those whoops never get old. That hole there to the left got really deep towards the end too. Luckily on the second day they went back and filled it in. This braking bump right here before this turn, I don't know if it was a braking bump or if it was a root down there, But every time it would bump me, and I would be like fixated on that tree that's like right in front of me. I hated it. I'm trying to get around this guy. I don't know if I managed to get around him or not. Yeah, dude. Look at that. Sometimes it seems like I know what I'm doing. Sometimes. See, this outside line right here was the far better line to take. There's like a cut line on the inside, but it just wasn't good. Making some better line choices through here this time. Not perfect, but the first few laps I took the left line, and it kind of hooks in and then goes immediately to the right, and it was just a terrible line choice. This one here, that line to the right is better, because this one kind of like goes in and then turns immediately. Line choice is definitely a lot of it in these races, and it's something that I think I need to get better at. Coming up on this sketcher, you see how it threw my front tire? Every time, if you didn't hit it perfectly in that crux, it would throw your tire. I guess you could probably wheelie over it, I suppose, if you had those sort of skills. Couldn't quite catch up to that last guy. But there you have it. End of the second moto. Results time. First moto. Actually not last somehow, even though I didn't make the full race. And then second moto, basically dead last, even though I felt better. That's how it goes every time. And then overall, I was 22nd. Not terrible considering how bad I felt like I did. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching, and we'll see you at the next one.